The cult of busy, how we got here. I was sitting in a cafe last week, eavesdropping on conversations. Don't judge, we all do it. When I heard the most revealing exchange between two friends. How are you? One asked. Busy, the other replied, with what I swear was a hint of pride. God, me too. Crazy busy. Haven't had a moment to breathe in weeks. They nodded at each other with a strange mix of exhaustion and satisfaction, like members of some exclusive club. And it hit me, they weren't complaining. They were bragging. We've all been there. I've done it countless times, wearing my busyness like some twisted badge of honor. Sorry I haven't called you back in 3 weeks, just been absolutely swamped. Meanwhile, I had somehow found time to watch an entire season of that new show everyone's talking about. Worth it though. When did busy become the default state of being? When did perpetual motion become the marker of a life well lived? The truth is, we didn't arrive here overnight. Our cult of busyness has deep historical roots. The Protestant work ethic that shaped American culture equated productivity with moral virtue. Idle hands were literally considered the devil's workshop. Fast forward to the digital revolution, and we've created a world where being unavailable is practically a sin. Research from the University of California shows that the average office worker is interrupted every 3 minutes and 5 seconds. No wonder we're all walking around in a state of fractured attention, feeling simultaneously exhausted, and like we haven't done enough. Social media hasn't helped. We scroll through carefully curated glimpses of other people's hustle culture, their side hustles becoming side hustles, while we wonder if we should be doing more. The algorithm rewards constant content creation, and somehow that expectation has spilled over into our real lives. What's most insidious about our busyness addiction is how it's destroyed our ability to simply be. Remember boredom? That glorious state where some of our most creative thoughts emerge? I recently found myself reaching for my phone while waiting for water to boil. Water to boil. That takes literally 2 minutes. The cult of busy has convinced us that every moment must be optimized, every second productive. We've forgotten that humans aren't machines. We're organisms that need fallow periods, that actually thrive with rhythms of effort and rest. In the chapters ahead, we'll unpack how to break free from this cycle. But first, we need to acknowledge our membership in this cult. Hi, I'm Author, and I'm a recovering busyaholic. The first step is admitting we have a problem. The lazy paradox. Why being truly lazy takes work. I have a confession to make. I'm terrible at being lazy. This hit me last Sunday when I finally carved out a do-nothing day. By 10 a.m., I had reorganized my spice rack, answered just a few work emails, and mapped out a 5-year financial plan. My lazy day looked suspiciously like productivity in sweatpants. Here's the paradox that messes with my head. Actual laziness, the good kind that rejuvenates us, requires intention, boundaries, and sometimes even courage. In other words, being properly lazy takes work. Ironic, right? Think about it. When was the last time you did absolutely nothing without feeling guilty? For me, it was probably 1998, before smartphones made us perpetually available and before I internalized the idea that my worth was tied to my output. Researchers at Harvard found that people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. Electric shocks, people. We've become so uncomfortable with stillness that we'd rather experience physical pain than mental quiet. If that doesn't highlight our collective dysfunction around rest, I don't know what does. The problem is that true laziness doesn't just happen in our hyper-connected, work-obsessed culture. When I asked my friend Miguel how he relaxes, he laughed and said, I set 3 alarms, block my calendar, turn off notifications, and fight the urge to clean my garage instead. His laziness requires more planning than most people's vacations. This is what I call advanced laziness. It's strategic, deliberate, and surprisingly difficult to master. Why? Because we're fighting against powerful cultural currents. From childhood, we're taught that idle hands are the devil's workshop. My grandmother used to literally knock on my bedroom door if I was just reading to ask if I wanted to help with chores. Message received. Relaxation makes you vulnerable to vacuum cleaner assignments. The science backs this up. Psychologist Sandy Mann explains that our brains have been conditioned to seek constant stimulation. Disconnecting triggers our body's stress response. Our palms get sweaty, our minds race, and we reach for our phones like they're oxygen masks on a descending plane. But here's the beautiful twist. Learning to be strategically, intentionally lazy might be the most productive thing you'll ever do. When we allow our brains the space to decompress, we activate what neuroscientists call the default mode network, the constellation of brain regions where creativity, insight, and our sense of self all flourish. So ironically, getting better at being lazy might be the hardest work we need to do. Intentional idleness, the art of strategic non-doing. Last month, I found myself lying on my living room floor, staring at the ceiling for 45 minutes. My partner walked in, looked down at me with concern, and asked if I was okay. "I'm practicing intentional idleness," I replied with complete seriousness. "Is that what we're calling depression naps now?" he joked. But here's the thing, I wasn't depressed. I was engaged in what might be the most radical act in our hyperactive world: strategic non-doing. Let me explain the difference between mindless scrolling, my usual form of rest, and intentional idleness. When I'm doom scrolling Twitter or watching my 15th TikTok about how to organize refrigerators, I'm not actually resting. My brain is processing thousands of micro decisions, advertisements, and emotional reactions. It's like feeding my mind a steady diet of digital pop rocks, all stimulation, zero nutrition. Intentional idleness, by contrast, is the conscious choice to create unstructured space. It's when we deliberately step away from the productivity treadmill and allow our minds to wander without destination or purpose. It's staring at clouds, taking a meandering walk without your phone, or yes, occasionally lying on the floor examining the weird water stain on your ceiling that vaguely resembles Danny DeVito. Just me? The ancient Romans had a beautiful phrase for this: otium sanctum, sacred idleness. They understood something we've forgotten, that insight, creativity, and renewal require fallow periods. You can't harvest wisdom from a field you never allow to rest. A study from the University of Southern California found that even brief periods of genuine mental downtime strengthen activity in the brain's default mode network, the neural system responsible for autobiographical memory, imagination, and moral reasoning. In other words, your most human qualities actually depend on you occasionally doing nothing at all. Of course, mastering intentional idleness isn't easy. The first few times I tried it, I lasted about 90 seconds before reaching for my phone like a lab rat hitting the dopamine lever. My own thoughts felt simultaneously boring and overwhelming. I had to build this muscle gradually, starting with 5 minutes of directed daydreaming and working up from there. The hardest part? Defending this space from both external demands and my own programmed guilt. I actually put "stare at wall" in my calendar and treat it with the same respect as important meetings. Because that's exactly what it is: an important meeting with my own consciousness. So the next time you catch someone gazing into space, don't interrupt them. They're not being lazy. They're engaging in the sophisticated art of non-doing, and it might be the most important nothing they do all day. Digital detox without the drama. I once tried a digital detox that lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. It ended with me frantically searching for my phone in the freezer, where I'd hidden it from myself, because I suddenly needed to know if otters hold hands while sleeping. Spoiler, they do, and it's adorable. My dramatic approach to digital detoxing, complete with declarations on social media about going off-grid and ceremoniously deleting apps only to reinstall them minutes later, is probably familiar to many of you. We've turned disconnecting into another performance, another thing to optimize, another way to fail. Here's what I've learned since my freezer phone incident. Digital detoxes don't have to be dramatic all-or-nothing affairs that we inevitably abandon before dinner. The problem isn't that we're weak-willed digital addicts, though, okay, maybe a little. It's that we're approaching digital wellness with the same perfectionistic, extreme mindset that got us into trouble in the first place. Dr. Cal Newport, author of Digital Minimalism, suggests that what we really need isn't abstinence, but intention. When I interviewed him for this book, he explained it like this. Most people have never actually decided which digital tools add value to their life and which don't. They've just accepted everything by default. That hit me hard. I'd never consciously chosen to check my emails 74 times a day or to wake up scrolling. It just happened, like digital drift. Instead of dramatic detoxes, what if we tried curious experimentation? For 2 weeks, I tested replacing my morning phone scroll with staring out the window for 5 minutes. Just looking at trees. Revolutionary, I know. But something surprising happened. I started noticing details in my neighborhood that had been there for years. The way the morning light hits my neighbor's red door. The family of cardinals that visits precisely at 7:15 a.m. The changing patterns of commuter traffic. My world got bigger by going smaller. Research from the University of California shows that our devices fragment our attention into pieces so tiny they might as well be molecular. Every notification resets our concentration clock. The average person needs 23 minutes to refocus after an interruption, yet we interrupt ourselves every few minutes. The key isn't swearing off technology forever. Let's be realistic. It's creating intentional boundaries that work with your actual life. Maybe it's phone-free mornings or no-scroll Sundays or, my personal favorite, what I call airplane mode hours, where I pretend I'm 35,000 feet in the air with spotty Wi-Fi, even though I'm just sitting in my kitchen. Digital wellness isn't about dramatic gestures. It's about quiet intentions, small boundaries, and remembering that the most interesting things usually happen when we look up. The joy of missing out, embracing life's negative space. Last summer, 3 different friends invited me to 3 different destination weddings on 3 consecutive weekends. Each required flights, hotels, and coordinating with people I hadn't seen since college. My initial response was to say yes to all of them because FOMO, fear of missing out. What if someone rode a mechanical bull in a wedding dress and I wasn't there to witness it? After hyperventilating into a paper bag about the logistics and cost of this wedding triathlon, I had a revelation. What if missing out wasn't something to fear, but something to actively embrace? I call it JOMO, the joy of missing out, and it might be the most underrated pleasure of modern life. Think about it. When was the last time you declined an invitation and felt that delicious wave of relief wash over you? For me, it was cancelling plans to attend a networking event that promised synergistic opportunity cultivation, but really meant awkwardly balancing a plastic cup of cheap wine while trying to remember if the person I was talking to was named Dave or Dan. When I texted, "So sorry, can't make it tonight," I felt like I'd just been released from prison. JOMO isn't about becoming a hermit, though honestly, some days that doesn't sound half bad. It's about recognizing that every yes is automatically a no to something else, often something you actually need, like sleep, solitude, or watching that show everyone's been telling you about for 3 years. Artists understand this concept intuitively. They call it negative space, the empty area around and between subjects that's just as important as the subjects themselves. Without negative space, a painting becomes cluttered, chaotic, unreadable. The same is true for our calendars and our lives. Psychologist Desiree Dickerson explains that psychological space, time when we're not actively engaged or producing, is essential for neural integration. In other words, your brain literally needs you to miss out on stuff sometimes. I've started thinking of my life as a carefully curated museum rather than a jam-packed storage unit. Not everything deserves wall space. Some invitations, opportunities, and obligations need to be left in the gift shop. My practical JOMO strategy? The 24-hour pause. When invited to something non-urgent, I say, "Let me check my schedule and get back to you tomorrow." This creates space to ask myself, does this align with my priorities? Will I still want to do this when the day arrives? Is this a genuine yes or a guilt yes? Learning to love what you're missing out on might be the ultimate luxury in our era of endless options. Sometimes, the best memories are the ones you never made. Slow productivity, getting more done by doing less. I once spent an entire weekend creating a complex productivity system with color-coded labels, 5 different apps synced together, and a journal method that required 3 different pens. By Sunday night, I had the world's most beautiful system and had accomplished exactly nothing. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stared at my empty laundry hamper and full inbox. That's when I realized I wasn't interested in actually being productive. I was interested in feeling productive. There's a crucial difference. True productivity isn't about doing more things. It's about doing the right things more deeply. I call this slow productivity, and it's completely changed how I work and live. Think of it like slow cooking versus microwaving. Sure, you can zap a potato in 3 minutes, but slow roast it for an hour, and you get something with depth, complexity, and actual flavor. Our work deserves the same treatment. Research from Georgetown University found that knowledge workers are interrupted every 6 minutes, yet meaningful cognitive work requires at least 23 uninterrupted minutes to reach a flow state. No wonder we all feel simultaneously exhausted and like we've accomplished nothing. We're stuck in productivity purgatory, never quite reaching the promised land of deep work. My turning point came when I started tracking not how many tasks I completed, but how many hours I spent in a state of undistracted focus. The results were humbling. On my busiest days, when I responded to 87 emails and attended 5 meetings, I averaged about 36 minutes of actual deep work. On days when I protected large blocks of time for fewer priorities, I sometimes hit 4 hours. And guess which days produced work I was actually proud of? Slow productivity isn't about being a slacker. It's about being strategic with your finite attention and energy. It means embracing the power of subtraction, asking what can I remove instead of what can I add. Creating friction for distractions. My phone now lives in a kitchen drawer during work hours. Normalizing delayed responses. Not everything needs an immediate reply. Prioritizing completion over initiation. Finishing one project instead of starting 5. When I told my chronic multitasking friend Elena about slow productivity, she rolled her eyes. "I don't have time to work slowly," she said. But that's exactly the point. Working slowly doesn't take more time. It takes less. Because you're not constantly switching tasks, redoing rushed work, or recovering from interruptions. Slow productivity isn't about moving at a snail's pace. It's about moving with intention, like a chef who has mastered their craft. Less frantic chopping, more deliberate cuts, and a much more delicious result. Time abundance, changing your relationship with the clock. Last Tuesday, I found myself sprinting through a parking lot, sweating profusely, one shoe untied, frantically checking my watch. I was going to be 3 minutes late to a yoga class about mindfulness and inner calm. The irony wasn't lost on me as I power walked into the studio, breathing like a winded rhinoceros, trying to namaste my way to serenity. Why do we do this to ourselves? When did time become our enemy instead of our ally? I've spent most of my adult life in what psychologists call time poverty, that perpetual feeling that there's never enough time and we're always behind. It's like living with a tiny drill sergeant in your head, constantly barking that you're running late, falling behind, or wasting precious minutes. My relationship with the clock has been more toxic than my college boyfriend who thought cargo shorts were appropriate dinner attire. But here's what I've been learning. Time abundance isn't about having more hours. We all get the same 24, whether we're Beyoncé or a barista. It's about changing our psychological relationship with time itself. Research from the University of British Columbia found that people who feel time affluent report significantly higher levels of happiness and lower stress, regardless of how objectively busy they are. It's not about how many things you have to do, It's about how you mentally frame the time you have. My first experiment with time abundance was almost embarrassingly simple. I started setting my clocks 10 minutes fast, not to trick myself into being early. I'm too smart for that mind game, usually, but to create a psychological buffer zone. Those phantom 10 minutes became my personal time cushion, a small but meaningful space between activities where I could breathe, think, and transition without panic. Another game changer? I stopped using the word busy to describe my life. It sounds trivial, but language shapes perception. When someone asked how I was doing, instead of my default crazy busy response, I started saying things like, I'm in a full season right now, or even just, I'm well. This tiny linguistic shift stopped reinforcing the scarcity mindset I was trapped in. The most radical practice has been what time researcher Laura Vanderkam calls time tracking. I logged how I spent every 30-minute block for 2 weeks. The results were humbling. Turns out I wasn't as time poor as I thought. I was just leaking time into Instagram scrolling sinkholes and quick TV episodes that turned into 3-hour binges. I wasn't lacking time. I was lacking awareness of where my time was actually going. Time abundance isn't about having nothing to do. It's about owning your choices about what you do. And maybe not showing up to Zen yoga looking like you just escaped a bear chase. The Unbusy Body. Physical practices for genuine rest. My body and I have a complicated relationship. On Monday mornings, it begs for sleep while my alarm clock insists otherwise. By Wednesday, it's running on caffeine and pure spite. And on Sundays, when I finally have time to rest, my body seems confused by the concept, like a hamster that keeps running even when the wheel has stopped. Sound familiar? Here's what I've realized. Our bodies have forgotten how to truly rest. We've trained them to exist in 2 states, full throttle productivity or complete collapse. It's like we only have 2 gears, fifth and park, with nothing in between. Last year, I visited my cousin who lives on a small farm in Vermont. I noticed something strange about her movements. They were normal. She wasn't speed walking to the mailbox or aggressively chopping vegetables like they'd personally wronged her. When I mentioned this, she laughed and said, "City people move like they're being chased by invisible bees." She wasn't wrong. My body had internalized the hustle, carrying tension I didn't even recognize anymore. My relaxed state was most people's mildly anxious state. Neuroscientist Dr. Claudia Aguirre explains this phenomenon as embodied stress, when chronically elevated cortisol actually changes our physical baseline. Our muscles remain partially contracted even when, at rest, our breathing stays shallow, and our nervous systems forget what true relaxation feels like. My journey toward physical unbusyness began with something embarrassingly simple: learning to sit still without squirming for 5 whole minutes. No phone, no TV, no podcast, just sitting. The first time I tried it, my leg bounced so aggressively it could have registered on the Richter scale. From there, I graduated to what I call pace matching, consciously slowing my physical movements to match the actual urgency of the task. Brushing teeth doesn't require Olympic-level brushing speed. Making the bed? Not a timed event. The most powerful practice has been body scanning, a simple technique where you mentally travel through your body, noticing and releasing tension. I discovered I was clenching my jaw so habitually that my dentist had started calling me the grinder, not my preferred nickname. Research from the University of California shows that these deliberate physical downshifts don't just feel good. They trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing inflammation and improving everything from digestive function to sleep quality. Our bodies weren't designed for constant motion, followed by Netflix-induced comas. They crave rhythmic alternation between genuine activity and genuine rest. Finding that middle gear, where movement is intentional rather than frantic, might be the most unappreciated luxury of our time. And it starts with something as simple as unclenching your jaw right now. You just did it, didn't you? Me too. Mind at ease. mental decluttering for inner peace. My brain is like my junk drawer, crammed with random bits of information, tangled worries, and at least 4 half-formed grocery lists at any given moment. Last Tuesday, I found myself lying awake at 3 a.m., calculating how many hours of sleep I could still get if I fell asleep right now, while simultaneously rehearsing an argument with my mother that happened in 2012. Mental clutter is the invisible burden we all carry. And unlike the chaos in my closet, which visitors politely pretend not to notice, no one can see the constant thought tornado spinning through our minds. A few years ago, my thought spirals got so bad that I downloaded a meditation app. The soothing voiced guide instructed me to just notice my thoughts without judgment. 20 seconds in, I was judging my thoughts, then judging myself for judging my thoughts, then wondering if I'd remembered to pay my credit card bill, then panicking about retirement, then contemplating if squirrels remember where they bury their nuts, or if they just find new ones. All while the guide serenely suggested I return to my breath. Meditation and I have since made peace. More on that later. But it taught me something crucial. The problem isn't having thoughts. It's being constantly hijacked by them. Neuroscientist Dr. Amishi Jha describes our attention as a flashlight that's constantly being grabbed by whatever shouts loudest in our mental space. With digital pings, work stress, and that weird noise your refrigerator started making last week, all competing for attention, our poor cognitive flashlight is being yanked in 1,000 directions. My first step toward mental decluttering wasn't meditation. It was what I call a thought download. Every morning, I spend 5 minutes dumping everything from my brain onto paper. No organization, no bullet points, just mental vomit on the page. It's not pretty, but it's effective. Research from the University of Toronto shows that this simple practice reduces cognitive load and creates mental space. Another game changer has been establishing worry boundaries. I now have a designated worry chair in my apartment. If I catch myself spiraling about my retirement account or that weird text my boss sent, I literally tell myself, "Not now, save it for the worry chair at 5 p.m. Surprisingly, about 80% of my worries never make it to the chair. They evaporate once I stop feeding them with immediate attention. The most unexpected mental decluttering technique came from my friend Elena, who suggested a no-input day once a month. 24 hours without podcasts, news, social media, or even music with lyrics. Just mental white space. The first time I tried it, I nearly broke out in hives. The second time, I had my clearest thinking in months. Our minds, like our homes, weren't designed to store everything we've ever encountered. Sometimes the bravest act of self-care is simply pressing the mental delete button. Social minimalism, meaningful connections over constant contact. Last month, I realized I had hundreds of online friends, thousands of digital connections, and a phone bursting with contacts. Yet I couldn't think of 5 people I could call at 2 a.m. if I got a flat tire. Something was seriously off with my social math. We live in a bizarre reality where it's possible to be constantly connected, yet profoundly lonely. I've caught myself texting multiple conversations while on a video call, while also scrolling through social media, all while feeling somehow isolated. Like being surrounded by a crowd where everyone's speaking a different language. This digital paradox actually has a name. Social psychologists call it alone together syndrome, when we're technically more connected than ever, but experiencing less meaningful engagement. Studies show that despite having more communication channels than any humans in history, we report fewer close confidants than previous generations. My wake-up call came during a particularly low week when I sent out a group text saying I was struggling. Most responded with emojis. None actually called. And the hard truth? I'd done the exact same thing to others countless times. We'd all normalized symbolic connection over substantive support. I'm not suggesting some nostalgic return to rotary phones and neighbor visits. Instead, I've been experimenting with what I call social minimalism. Like decluttering your closet, social minimalism isn't about having fewer items. It's about keeping what truly adds value. For me, it's meant creating connection zones where phones aren't allowed. My dining table is now a sacred no-screen space. Replacing one social media scroll each day with a voice memo to someone important. Implementing a 3:30 rule. If I've texted someone back and forth 3 times in 30 minutes, I call instead. Shifting from broad social broadcasting to smaller, deeper engagement. The most counterintuitive discovery? Setting social boundaries actually expands genuine connection. By creating space between interactions, real, undistracted space, we give relationships room to breathe and deepen. I still have hundreds of online connections, but now I know which ones would help me change a tire at 2 a.m., and that's made all the difference. Working lazy, career success without the burnout. My resume says detail-oriented self-starter with excellent time management skills. The reality? I once showed up to a Zoom meeting wearing a professional top, pajama bottoms, and a face mask I forgot to remove. When asked about my appearance, I had to admit I was preparing for skincare, not a presentation. Work culture has convinced us that success requires constant hustle, perpetual availability, and the willingness to sacrifice sleep, relationships, and basic hygiene for the almighty career gods. I spent years buying into this mythology, keeping my Slack status green well past midnight, answering emails from the bathroom, and bragging about crazy weeks like they were badges of honor rather than signs of an unsustainable system. Then came my wake-up call, a panic attack in the cereal aisle because I couldn't decide between Cheerios and Chex, while simultaneously joining a quick 5-minute call that turned into an hour-long meeting. As milk-soaked cereal boxes were cleaned up, grocery store staff, I realized something had to change. That's when I discovered the counterintuitive truth. The most successful professionals aren't the ones working themselves to death. They're the strategic minimalists who've mastered what I call working lazy. Working lazy isn't about doing nothing. It's about being fiercely protective of your energy and attention. It's working smarter with clear boundaries that actually make you more effective. Research from Microsoft's Workplace Analytics team found that their most productive employees weren't logging the most hours. They were taking more breaks. These productivity ninjas worked in focused 52-minute intervals, followed by 17-minute breaks, a rhythm that allowed for sustained high performance without burnout. My own working lazy transformation began with 3 simple changes. First, I implemented artificial deadlines, finishing projects a day before they're actually due. This eliminated the adrenaline-fueled all-nighters that were destroying my health and, honestly, producing mediocre work. Second, I embraced the power of a gracious no. Instead of automatically saying yes to every project, I started asking, what would have to come off my plate to make room for this? This simple question changed everything. Finally, I adopted minimum effective dose thinking. When asked for a 20-page report, I first asked myself, could a 5-page version accomplish the same goal? 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes. The turning point in my career wasn't when I started working harder. It was when I started working deliberately. Like many professionals who've calculated that a 15% raise requiring a 40% increase in hours simply doesn't add up mathematically. Working lazy isn't about doing less. It's about protecting your most valuable resource, your life energy. And sometimes that means remembering to remove your face mask before important meetings. The Unbusy life, a sustainable path to happiness. Last week, I found myself doing something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Absolutely nothing. I sat on my porch for a full hour watching clouds drift across the sky. No podcast in my ears, no book in my hands, no purpose other than existing in that moment. And I didn't feel guilty about it. That might not sound revolutionary, but for someone who used to schedule bathroom breaks and considered relaxation another item on my to-do list, this was my Mount Everest. I didn't reach for my phone once. I didn't make mental lists of everything I should be doing instead. I just was. This is what the unbusy life looks like. not a life without responsibilities or challenges, but one where we've reclaimed our autonomy from the cult of busyness, where we've created enough space to remember who we are when we're not producing, achieving, or optimizing. The unbusy life isn't about retiring to a remote cabin, though some days that sounds pretty great. It's about living deliberately in whatever circumstances we find ourselves. It's saying no to the artificial emergencies and yes to what genuinely matters. It's choosing depth over breadth in our work, our relationships, and our personal growth. I've come to think of the unbusy life as a garden rather than a factory. Gardens require attention, but not constant activity. They have natural cycles of growth and rest. Most importantly, gardens need space. Crowded plants struggle while those given room to breathe flourish. Research from Harvard's psychology department confirms what philosophers have known for centuries. Happiness doesn't come from accumulating achievements or possessions, but from having time affluence, the feeling that you have enough time to pursue meaningful activities. The greatest irony I've discovered is that the unbusy life often accomplishes more than the busy one. When we stop fragmenting our attention, when we work from rest rather than exhaustion, we bring our full creative capacity to fewer, more important pursuits. I still have days when I fall back into old patterns, when I catch myself multitasking while watching TV, which means I'm doing two things poorly instead of one thing well. But now I recognize the warning signs earlier. I know what restored feels like, and I can feel when I'm drifting away from it. The unbusy path isn't one you walk once and complete. It's a daily choice to step off the hamster wheel, even when everyone around you is still running. It's remembering that the most meaningful moments of your life probably won't happen while checking emails. So consider this your permission slip for strategic laziness, for protecting your time and attention as fiercely as you would protect any other precious resource. Because in the end, a life well lived isn't measured by how much you did, but by how fully you lived.